So, when you sent in that Wikipedia article on the Ishrat Jahan case,
Hmm.
um, I have to admit that phrase, encounter killing, it really just kind of piqued my interest, Like there's just something inherently mysterious about it.
Hmm.
And this case, as I think we're about to find out, well, it's riddled with complexities, to say the least.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a case that gripped India. And it all really starts with this incident back on June 15th, 2004. Ishrat Jahan, at the time, was a 19-year-old woman from Mumbai, and she was killed along with three men by the Ahmedabad police.
And the police narrative, at least initially, it seemed pretty clear-cut, right?
Oh, absolutely. They claim that these four individuals were operatives,
Yeah.
operatives of Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Lati, and that they were on their way to actually assassinate Narendra Modi. He was the then chief minister of Gujarat. For those listeners maybe not as familiar with India's political landscape, it'd be kind of like saying they were targeting, a high-profile governor here in the U.S.
So like a very significant accusation then, and obviously with some major political ramifications too. So did any evidence surface, right away to actually support this?
Well, that's where things start to get a little murky. There was this publication based in Lahore, the Ghazwa Times, and initially they linked Ishrat to Leti. And, on the surface, this seemed to, lend some credence to the police's claims, but, and this is really important, the publication later retracted this whole statement. They called it a journalistic mistake.
Okay, so that's a curious development, almost like they were pressured into making that initial claim, right?
Hmm.
What about Ishrat's family? How did they react to all of this?
Her family vehemently denied any involvement of Ishrat in any terrorist activities. They were basically asserting that she had no criminal background whatsoever. And this is, I think, where we start to see public opinion begin to shift a little bit. You see, this case wasn't happening in a vacuum. There were all these growing concerns at the time, particularly in Gujarat, about what were being called encounter killings.
Can you elaborate on that a little? What exactly does encounter killing actually mean in this context?
Sure, yeah. Basically, it refers to these incidents where police kill individuals in, supposed shootouts or encounters, often claiming self-defense. But around this time, human rights groups, well, they've been raising alarms about the increasing frequency of these types of incidents and, more importantly, the lack of proper investigations afterwards.
So there was already this sense of skepticism then, I guess, surrounding the police's account in this specific case.
Precisely. The conflicting accounts, coupled with Ishrat's family's just complete insistence on her innocence, well, it fueled all these demands for a thorough and impartial investigation. People really wanted to know, was this a genuine counterterrorism operation? Or was there something else, something more sinister at play here?
And that is just the beginning. The investigation itself actually unearthed even more layers to this already very complex story. But we'll dive into all of that right after this. So we have this backdrop of public doubt, right?
Yeah.
And then the investigations finally begin. What were some of the, the key turning points, the things that really shifted the whole narrative of the Ishrat Jahan case?
Well, a really pivotal moment came in 2009 with this report that was filed by SP Tamang. He was a magistrate, appointed to investigate the encounter. And a magistrate in the Indian legal system, it's basically like a judge, but they conduct these preliminary inquiries.
Okay.
So anyway, Tamang's findings ended up being pretty explosive because he declared that the entire encounter was actually staged,
Yeah.
meaning those four individuals, they weren't killed in some kind of shootout like the police had claimed, but they were actually killed in police custody.
Wow. So that narrative of like a thwarted terrorist attack, that basically starts to crumble right then and there.
Yeah, pretty much. And it actually gets even worse from there because Tamang's report went on to imply that, well, it implied that some police officers saw these encounter killings almost like a way to, to kind of climb the ranks and gain some notoriety.
Interesting.
It alleged this whole system of rewards and recognition for officers, that were involved in these types of incidents. So yeah, suggesting a very possible motive for the staged encounter.
And this report didn't shy away from naming names either, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. High-ranking officers, including this guy DG Van Zara, who, by the way, was already facing a lot of scrutiny for his alleged role in a bunch of other encounter cases. But yeah, he was named in the report.
Wow.
So suddenly, this wasn't just about Ishrat Jahan and the three men killed alongside her, but it really pointed to this potentially systemic issue within the police force itself.
Yeah, I mean, that is a massive claim.
Right.
With huge implications, for sure. But then didn't that David Headley thing, didn't that complicate things even further?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like just as the nation was really grappling with this whole Toming report, right? These media reports started surfacing in 2010, and they were claiming that David Headley, who was is a Lashkar-e-Taiba operative, and he was actually involved in the 2008 Mumbai attacks. Well, they were claiming that he had confessed to Ishrat's involvement with Letty, like during his interrogation and everything.
So, I mean, on the surface, this seems to, like, validate that initial police narrative that she was involved, right?
Yeah, you would think so, right?
I know.
Except for one, like, really crucial detail here. The National Investigation Agency, or NIA, they're the ones who were actually directly handling Headley's interrogation at the time. And they completely denied all those media reports, like straight up called them baseless.
Wow. So which is it?
Right.
So now we have this magistrate claiming this whole staged encounter. Then you have this convicted terrorist who's seemingly backing up the police's story. And then the agency who's actually in charge of this interrogation comes out and just denies these claims completely. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around all of it.
It really is. And it just goes to show you how hard it can be. I mean, trying to actually uncover the truth in cases like this, especially when you have all these different agencies, with potentially conflicting interests, all involved and, chiming in.
Yeah, for sure.
But despite all these contradictions, the investigations, they continued.
And then those investigations brought a whole new wave of shocking stuff to light, didn't they?
They really did. So in 2011, they formed a Special Investigation Team, or SIT. And they were tasked with, like, specifically looking into the Ishrat Jahan encounter.
Okay.
And, well, their findings basically echoed the Toming report. They concluded that that encounter was definitely staged.
Okay, so that just adds even more weight to this whole idea.
Yeah.
That this was not some, legitimate counterterrorism operation.
Right. And to make matters even more, intense, in 2013, the Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI for short, they're like India's top investigative agency. Well, they took over the entire case and then officially filed charges against a bunch of different police officers.
Including some of those high-profile names that we already mentioned.
Exactly, yeah. Like, G.L. Singhal, he was a senior officer back when the encounter happened. Well, he was among those charged, which, kind of signaled that the investigation was getting really close to, like, uncovering this potential conspiracy within the police force.
It seems like every new piece of information, like, just adds another layer to this whole thing. It's so complex.
It really is, yeah.
But we're not even done yet, are we? Because then the Intelligence Bureau, the IB, they get involved. And that's when things get even more tangled up. So last we left off, right, the CBI is making all these arrests, which really seems to point to this, like, really deep-rooted conspiracy thing within the police. And then the Intelligence Bureau comes in, and, well, things get even more complicated from there.
They really do, yeah. So 2013, that was like a really pivotal year for this entire case, because just as the CBI is starting to raise some serious questions, about the police's conduct this whole time, you have Asif Ibrahim, the chief of the Intelligence Bureau at the time, and, you can kind of think about that as India's equivalent of the FBI. Well, he makes this, like, really startling public statement.
Right, and that was a direct contradiction, really, to what that SIT had concluded, if I'm remembering that right.
Oh, totally. Like, Ibrahim comes out and completely contradicts their findings, and he even, like, challenges the NIA's earlier stance. And the NIA, remember, had said those reports about Headley's confession were baseless. Well, Ibrahim comes in and says, actually, the IB, we have independent evidence that proves Ishrat Jahan was definitely involved with Leonti. He even goes so far as to specifically cite Headley's confession to the FBI as proof.
Hold on. So now we have two intelligence agencies in India seeing two totally different things about the same guy, about the same confession.
Exactly. And it just goes to show how insanely difficult it can be, to get a clear picture, especially in these cases where intelligence gathering is involved.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it gets even more confusing because, like, right after all of that, you have all these leaks and contradictory claims, like, coming out of the woodwork. For example, Headlines Today, which was this big news channel, well, they air these audio recordings, and according to them, this was, like, clear proof of Ishrat's involvement in the plot against Modi.
But those were never actually verified, were they?
Nope, never authenticated. Their origins are still, like, completely unknown.
And then, of course, you have Tehelka, right? They come out with those recordings that supposedly back up that whole cover-up thing.
Yeah, it was just back and forth, back and forth. Like every time you thought you were getting closer to the truth, something else would come out and kind of just muddy the waters all over again.
Right. And then that brings us to 2016 and David Headley's testimony in that Mumbai court, which, I mean, honestly, just made things even more murky, didn't it?
It really did, because here you have him, right? The same David Headley, who had already contradicted himself on this before, with both the NIA and the IB kind of interpreting his words in totally different ways. So it really makes you wonder how much weight we should be giving to his testimony in the first place, especially
Right.
since he was, a convicted terrorist himself. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he had his own reasons for saying what he said.
Right, like maybe he was trying to save his own skin or something.
Exactly.
So, okay, let me get this straight. We've had years of investigations, court hearings, multiple reports from different agencies, even leaked recordings, right? And we're still basically left with that same question from the very beginning. Was Ishrat Jahan actually involved in terrorist activities or not?
That's really what it all boils down to, yeah.
Hmm.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating, but also so incredibly tragic. Because even with all of this information, all of these different angles, the truth is we still don't really know for sure.
So what are we supposed to take away from all of this then?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that in the world of, espionage and counterterrorism, things aren't always black and white. Sometimes, even when we do everything we can to find out what really happened, those definitive answers, they just remain out of reach.
It's kind of unsettling when you
Yeah.
really think about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, this whole thing, it became about so much more than just this one encounter, didn't it? It started a really important conversation about like the fight against terrorism, obviously, but also about due process, the abuse of power, and, just how difficult it can be to separate truth from fiction.
Absolutely, yeah. The Ishrat Jahan encounter, I think, it's this really potent reminder,
Yeah.
about the lasting human cost of these kinds of conflicts and about how important it is to never start fighting for justice and accountability, even when it feels like those things might be impossible to find.
It really makes you think. And on that note, to our listeners, we really want to encourage you to keep digging, to look at the information that's out there, and to come to your own conclusions about all of this. Because the Ishrat Jahan case, it's more than just a case at this point. It's a reminder that the search for truth, it's ongoing.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.